Zuko knew people were supposed to address spirits respectfully, but it had been a long and frustrating day, so he didn't have patience for polite. Plus, he and Tuli were kin. Her words, not his. As far as Zuko knew, being kin excused a lot. Never had for him, personally, but for others it seemed to do that. Tuli didn't look offended or surprised. Instead, she offered one of her whiskers to Zuko. Impatient cub. Tuli sighed. Where have you been? Zuko demanded to know. If you can just drop by anytime you feel like it, why haven't I seen you for so long? You needed my assistance? Well, there's this really annoying water spirit trying to kill me. Zuko stopped to really think about the question. Eventually he replied, No, I didn't really need your help. Tuli nodded, so Zuko went on. I guess I'm in deep trouble now, right? Since you decided to show now, but not before. Tuli shook her head. I can't just manifest any time I feel like it. I already told you this. I need to be summoned by a powerful shaman. Zuko finished Tuli's sentence for her. But I didn't summon you, so who did? It's different now. We're connected. Tuli hadn't changed one bit, still talking in riddles. Zuko would have to face his questions more carefully if he wanted to get straight answers out of her. Zuko took a deep breath and tried to remember all that Uncle had had time to teach him about spirits. They don't think like we do, obviously. What do you mean by connected? We're kin, in spirit and in blood. The answer sent chills down Zuko's spine. Blood? Tuli explained further. You and I are not of the same lineage, but all dragons are my kin. More non-answers. Zuko decided to let the matter drop for now and focus on more crucial issues. He wasn't sure how long Tuli would stick around this time, but he had a feeling this wasn't going to be a long visit. Even if the spirit had all the time in the world, Zuko himself was sort of in the middle of something. Now that they were on the topic of kin, I am a dragon now. For the record, I'm not complaining. Oddly enough, I'm not, just curious. Tuli smiled, which was really quite intimidating. Of course, you're not complaining. You were always a dragon, and you always will be. It's part of who you are. Why would you complain? Zuko could think of several things that were part of who he was that he could still complain about, but that was, again, off the topic. If he got distracted, the conversation would officially go nowhere. You mean I was a dragon even before I turned into one? Dragon at heart? Dragon in another lifetime? The last question came out more as a statement, for the more Zuko thought about it, the more the theory made sense, except... Well, lost spirits must have reincarnated as dragons and then as humans at some point. Why would the connection matter now for me? Tuli looked serious, but not in a scary, upset at your stupid question kind of way. More like the way Uncle looked when he was really thinking something through. You, Tuli finally said, are an exception. What am I? Am I a dragon? A human? What? The question had been bothering the prince ever since the water spirit had implied he was no longer counted as human. How profound was this change he had so carelessly embarked on? A dragon warrior. That's what humans called what you are. Zuko had never heard of dragon warriors, so the name alone didn't tell him anything new, except if this thing had happened to him was a one-of-a-kind occurrence. Why would someone have a name for it already? There are others like me? Other dragon warriors? No, but there have been. Many human generations ago, everyone knew of the dragon warriors. They were like real dragons, were respected. But dragon warriors were always rare, always exceptions, and when there hasn't been any in a few centuries, humans forget easily. Something in Tuli's tone told Zuko she had said all she intended on the matter. The prince made a mental note to ask Uncle about it, and moved on. Why me? Because of your destiny. That sort of didn't answer the question, and at the same time explained a lot. Destiny has always been out to get him. Also, hadn't the water spirit mentioned something along those lines as well? About Zuko being a pawn in some great game. One way or another, if it was Zuko's destiny to keep drawing spiritual interest to his person, he had to learn about it. What do you know of my destiny? Only one being knows your true destiny, and that being is you. No spirit, no matter how mighty, can decide it for you. Truly was starting to sound like Uncle. Find your own way and all that. Though, Truly went on, destiny is a funny thing. It does have a way of taking you towards certain people and events. The Avatar, Zuko said. Yes, your destiny does appear intertwined with that of the young world spirit, but that wasn't what I was referring to. I meant you and me, and the way you found your way to me. Despite the fact that I am forgotten and my shrines are no longer worshipped, you found me, and through me you found yourself, the way you always meant to be. Zuko weighed Truly's words. So I didn't really have a choice. Back when we met and you asked if I wanted to be turned into a dragon? I didn't understand the details of your proposal at the time, but that was what you were talking about, and you asked for my permission? Except that I didn't really have a choice. If becoming a dragon was something I was always meant to do. Out of the blue, Truly smacked Zuko on the back of his head with the end of her scaly tail. The hit was gentle, considering Truly's enormous size, but it still hurt. Thick-headed cub, have you listened to a word I've said? Well, Zuko replied, still rubbing the back of his head, you're the one who keeps contradicting yourself. You've always had a choice. Always. No matter how much a path is laid before you, only you can choose to take the first step, or walk other paths available. I could have chosen not to become a dragon. Zuko knew he was starting to repeat himself, but he really wanted to get to the bottom of this. Yes, but then your destiny would have been incomplete. Says you. But you're not exactly impartial on the matter, right? You have plans for me. Zuko felt like he was finally getting the hang of his own train of thoughts. He wasn't angry at Truly for having been away so long, but because, on a level, he knew Truly was keeping something from him, something important about why she was so interested in his progress and destiny. That was the part that had him act so aggressively. Yes, Truly said slowly, I have plans for you, but they can and will wait until you are a bit more whole. Everybody, Zuko realized, had plans for him. I thought you said becoming a dragon completed me. I never said that. No one is ever complete. The air nomads may have gotten close in their quest for harmony and peace with all living things, but certainly not children of fire. Fire is never still, and life is a journey, not a destination. So what are you waiting for? Zuko gestured with his hands, pointing out that they were sort of wasting time. I'm not whole, but I'll never be right. Why not tell me your plans here and now so I can decide whether I want to be part of them or not? You may never be complete, but you can be whole. They are not the same. Apparently, the mindset of a spirit was fundamentally based on a notion that playing with words was the best part of existence. Messing with destinies coming a close second. Zuko sighed. Why are you here? Obviously not to answer my questions. Time for answers will come. But not yet? Julie nodded. So, for the third time, you hear why. I come to you with a warning. You could have started with that, Zuko retorted. I could have, but impatient cub had many questions. Zuko shut his mouth and gestured for Tuli to go on. If, for once, she wanted to explain something to him, the prince didn't want to prevent her from doing so. Not even when his instincts told him that whatever Tuli had come to say to him was something he probably didn't want to hear. There was probably a real reason why she hadn't cut to the chase. Maybe the conversation so far had been Tuli's idea of small talk, keeping the mood casual and light before getting to the real important stuff. Tuli cocked her majestic head ever so slightly and then said, "Don't go to the north, to the land of ice and water." The warning was a lot less cryptic than Zuko had expected, but still left questions unanswered. If this is a warning, aren't you supposed to warn me about what bad stuff is going to happen if I go there? If you go to the land of ice and water, I won't be able to protect you. Protect me from what? No one knows the future, but you have to understand. You're important. Much more important than you realize. But the people of water have a special connection to some very powerful spirits. I fear for your safety. Zuko sort of appreciated Tuli's concern, but at the same time he was reluctant to agree to any more deals, no matter how much they were for his own protection. Well, then you'll be happy to hear I have no intention of going to the North Pole. I'm after the Avatar, and although that's where he's headed, he'll never get that far. Tuli looked unhappy with Zuko's answer. No one knows the future. Then stop acting like you do! Zuko had meant to shout at Tuli. She had come to him to offer her help, and didn't deserve being shouted at. Zuko was just tired. Also, he was starting to get sick of people telling him what he was or wasn't allowed to do with his life. For a moment, Zuko thought Tuli was offended, but instead, the spirit's jaw spread into a wide grin. Young and insolent. I like that. And just like that, the spirit was gone, leaving Zuko alone in the darkening forest. The night had fallen by the time Zuko reached Pai-Ho's stronghold. The fortress was famous for two things. First, it was the home base of the Yu-Yan. Second, it was said to be inescapable. A theory Zuko was about to put to the test. Something was inescapable only until someone escaped from it. That honor was far upon the Avatar, with a little help from the spiritual intervention of Zuko's own making. Getting in was easier than Zuko had expected. He'd done it just the other night without being caught, but then again, he had expected there to be more security in place now that it had the Avatar in custody. Sure, unlike the last time, the guards on the gate were actually looking under and into the carriage Zuko was using as his cover to enter undetected. But they weren't fast enough to catch even a glimpse of the blue spirit. There appeared to be more guards patrolling the yard and the walls than yesterday, but most of the soldiers were gathered in the main square in front of a large balcony. Zuko heard some of them whispering about a speech they were waiting to hear. A speech. Never too early to gloat, huh? The stronghold had more than one prison section, but Zuko was leaving from the presumption that the Avatar would be kept in the innermost one, right in the middle of the main building, guarded by 3 sets of walls. So that was where the blue spirit was headed. Zuko had to stop several times when guard patrols the hallway came his way. He might have had to take down a few of the said patrols once he got close to the Avatar, or they could hear the sound of struggle from the unknown number of guards waiting next to where the Avatar was kept, and could alarm the whole base. For now, though, there was no need to harass anyone, or let anyone know the fortress had an intruder. Zuko had perfected his blue spirit performance to such heights, it was easy for him to be one with the shadows. Tonight he was wearing a tighter and more skin-tight version of his blue spirit outfit. He had several in his repertoire, depending on the climate and the occasion, and he had his Dao sword, several hidden blades, and a rope on him. Zuko was more comfortable with his venture to attack his own nation now they had thought possibly earlier that day. Perhaps it was to do with the way he always felt more relaxed when he put on a mask and sneaking gear. The rules and restrictions that applied to Prince Zuko didn't seem to apply to the Blue Spirit. When disguised, he was free. Zuko climbed to the ceiling to let a guard pass under him. The soldier turned around a corner, but stopped shortly after that and knocked on a metal door that Zuko himself had passed only moments ago. Zuko listened carefully, curious to hear what was going on. Luckily he had keen hearing, a gift he had honed to compensate for his impaired eyesight. Ever since the Agni Kai, the vision in Zuko's left eye had been blurred around the edges. Although he rarely allowed that to affect his performance, he doubted even his crew knew of his disability. Though, strangely enough, his eyesight had been excellent when he had been a dragon. Yet another side effect he should probably go over with Uncle. "Yes?" asked someone from behind the door. The still closed door muffled the sound, but Zuko recognized the speaker anyway. "Admiral Zhao," the guard addressed. "The men are ready for you." A creak as a chair was moved and then some shuffling of papers. Soon after, the doors opened and closed, a click of a lock. The Admiral walked right under Zuko, and the other soldier in tow. Zuko thought he heard the man mumble something that sounded like, "Must not keep my audience waiting," under his breath. The sound of steps faded away, leaving Zuko with two options. He could stick to his original plan and get to the Avatar as fast as possible, or he could stop by the room Zhao was apparently using as his office. Procrastination was always a risk, but the ninja side of Zuko hated to waste such an opportunity, now that Zuko knew where Zhao was keeping his things and papers, and that the Admiral himself would be busy for at least a few minutes. The temptation to take a peek was overwhelming. Also, while Zhao was busy giving a self-congratulatory speech, he couldn't at the same time be doing something awful to the Avatar. That decided it for Zuko. He backtracked over to Zhao's door and began picking the lock with the tiniest knife he had on him, which was lucky thin enough to easily fit into the bulky metal lock. Although Zuko's experience in the art of lockpicking was limited, to say the least, he managed to make his way into the office quickly enough. The room was smaller than Zuko had expected. That was perhaps a good sign. This clearly wasn't the type of room Zhao was used to entertain guests, which increased the chances that Zuko would find something on Zhao's secret plan here. Considering that Zhao had spent only a few days at the stronghold, it was also possible he wasn't keeping any of his important documents here on his ship. Though the Admiral had at least received the letter of promotion the other day, maybe he received other mail here as well. There were no lights in the room, so Zuko relit a still smoldering torch on the wall. There were a few shelves on the walls, but the objects on them looked mostly decorative and had already been there long before Zhao showed up. Aside a Fire Nation banner on the wall, there was little else in the room but a desk and a chair. Zuko started with the desk. His eyes scanned the documents on it, but none of them particularly caught his attention. They mainly lists of supplies or reports from Zhao's subordinates, and although Zuko would have found them interesting on any other day, he didn't have the time to comb through them just now. Zuko was actually a bit surprised by the amount of paperwork he found. Somehow he expected Zhao to have gotten someone else to do this type of work for him, while he spent his day seeking glory on the battlefields. Apparently, the man actually worked pretty hard, and not just on self-congratulatory speeches and letters. In retrospect, Zuko's presumption had been a little silly. A man had to do something right to get promoted to the rank of Admiral. Also, Zhao had many flaws, but not giving his personal attention to his projects wasn't one of them. Even when the Admiral wanted to spy on Zuko, which the man must consider a petty task, he always showed up personally. Either he didn't trust his subordinates, or liked keeping all the strings in his hand. Maybe both. Zuko had only glanced through the less than half of the documents, then he decided to move on. A man like Zhao wouldn't leave something top secret just laying on his desk. Since the room was in Zhao's use only temporarily, it was unlikely there were any hidden compartments in the desk or the walls. Zuko got up and turned his attention to the shelf. Instead of picking up objects and random, Zuko lit a small flame on his hand and began to see if there was any markings in the dust. As he had suspected, no one had cleaned the shelves in a while, and as he hoped, one of the vases had been moved recently. Zuko put out the flame in his hand and picked up the vase. There was nothing under it. He looked into it. There was a roll of paper stuck inside. Aha! Zuko went to the door and listened. No one was moving in the corridor, so the Prince Society was safe enough to quickly go through his findings. Walking over to the desk again, pulling out a thin stack of papers from the vase and rolling them out and flat against the table. At first glance, these papers looked just as interesting as the ones left at an open view, but one of them caught Zuko's attention anyway. He pulled a single sheet of paper out of the stack, handling it carefully like it was fragile or precious. The characters in the paper were well executed, though they looked a bit rushed and lacked the even quality of a letter written by a court clerk. Zuko knew it was from the Fire Palace, though, and not just because there was a royal seal on it. It was his father's handwriting. Ozai had never written a letter to his son. There was little need when they both lived in the palace, and Ozai hadn't written to Zuko in his exile. Even the terms of Zuko's banishment had been written by a clerk and only signed by his father. Zuko would still recognize his father's determined yet unpolished calligraphy anywhere. Every line was drawn with the care you expect from someone who had received years of classical training, but still lacked the true passion for the art. It wasn't like Azula's handwriting, which was as perfect as everything else she did, nor was it like Uncle's stylistic and beautiful calligraphy. Ozai's handwriting was a lot like Zuko's own. Zuko felt numb. Finding a letter from the Fire Lord in the belongings of an admiral shouldn't have surprised him, although the Fire Lord usually only signed his letters, and even those usually with a seal. Some communications probably contained secrets and war plans were too important for the eyes of a clerk. That was certainly high-ranking enough to receive private orders from all the way to the top. That said, Zuko somehow not seeing this coming. My father writes this out personally, but not to me? Zuko felt a bit nervous, but a part of him was also excited, almost giddy. This was the closest Zuko had come to having a direct communication with his father since the Agni Kai. It was a letter from home. This piece of paper contained his father's wishes and opinions, things that often remained mysteries to Zuko even before his banishment. Ridiculous. A more rational voice inside Zuko's head reminded him, "The letter isn't that important. You don't even believe in your father like you used to. You should move on before someone realizes you're here." A more prominent part of Zuko wanted nothing more than to read the letter, no matter the risk of prolonged stay. And not because it was likely to contain information on Zhao's secret plans. Even after all these years, after all he's done to me, I still hang on every word. Zuko slumped his shoulders, letting his hesitation show. Then he started to read. Commander Zhao, we, the Fire Lord, ruler of the mighty archipelago of Fire Nation and her colonies, conquer the eastern coast and the middle plains of the Old Kingdom, devastator of the southern barbarians, leader of the civilized world, keeper of the Dragon Throne, hereby make our will known. All official letters from the Fire Nation nobles started with a list of merits. The longer the better, so naturally the Fire Lord's list of accomplishments was the longest. They weren't all things his father personally achieved, but represented the deeds of all the Fire Lords for him as well. In practice, this meant the list could have been endless, but probably because Ozai had to write the letter by hand, he gone with a relatively short version, only mentioning some recent highlights. Almost every letter started with the exact same introduction, but no noble worth their salt would have been so dumb as to skip over it. The introduction was often used to send silent messages to the recipient. Mentioning a very old, new, otherwise not usually included merit gave the letter a different undertone, working like a code key, helping to decipher what was said between the lines. Since the letter introduction held no big surprise, Zuko presumed this was a down-to-business type of message, most likely to do with the practical matters of the war. He read on. We congratulate you on your recent victory in the Battle of Lohun Bay. We take into consideration a proposal to place more troops in the north. The esteemed War Council will gather to discuss it, and after the resignation of Council Member Fuang, the proposition should face no resistance. More troops in the north? That was a bit surprising. Zuko couldn't think of any mildly important targets in the northern region of the Earth Kingdom. that hadn't already been conquered or squashed. Maybe the base under General Fong? But that seemed like an odd undertaking for the Navy. Zuko hoped that whatever it was the Zhao needed more troops for had nothing to do with the Avatar, or Truly's ominous warning. But unfortunately, the letters said nothing more on the topic. The matter regarding the Bella's Earth country of Bailuk will be handled accordingly. The pockets of resistance forces are to be located and crushed. We permit you to use any means you deem fit to reach this goal. Any and all citizens who have participated in the resistance or have aided in may be sentenced to prison time or death without a trial. The raids to supply lines 6 and 7 will be put to an end at all costs. The men responsible will be disposed of in a way that will send a clear warning to all who may plan on following their example. Apprehending the leaders of the Vendel movement, referred to as the Southern Water Tribe Fleet, a lie for questioning is preferable but not mandatory. To aid you in these efforts, we have assigned warships Tang and Alman to the Southern Navy Department and their crews of 150 men in total under your command. The vessel captains have been sent orders to report to you at Kupak Bay in 3 days' time. The Avatar, a vigilante and enemy of the nation, is to be apprehended at the earliest possible hour, and to be brought to Azulon for a trial by the Dragon Throne for his crimes against the world. The Fire Lord's power had many names, but held different implications. The term Dragon Throne was traditionally used when speaking of the Fire Lord's position as the supreme judicial force in the land. Zuko had never given the term much thought before, but now it made him wonder if dragons had, at some point in history, been considered good judges. Heck, it might even be a direct reference to the power of dragons. Maybe dragons were used as a symbol of judging a man's past actions and character. We permit you to use all the means and resources available to you in reaching this goal. The Avatar's persistence in eluding capture is a disgrace and undermines the power of the nation. If anyone stands in the way of the apprehension, even the banished Prince Zuko, a member of the royal line, you are permitted to deal with the complications as you deem fit. Capturing the Avatar is a first priority. By the power bestowed upon us, we bid you farewell. The letter wasn't long. Zuko had many expectations toward it, but somehow he still felt disappointed, and conflicted, and sad, and angry all at once. His father had given Zhao permission to, in essence, consider Zuko as much an enemy of the nation as the Avatar was. Should he and Zhao try to capture the Avatar at the same time? Zuko knew that the Admiral's resources and his own had never been symmetrical. Zhao had hundreds of warships under his command, while Zuko had one. Zhao had access to all the reports and information passing through the official Fire Nation channels, while Zuko had to spy on his own nation just to hear what was going on. But the asymmetry had so far only applied to their resources. Zuko's right to capture the Avatar had been equal to that of the Admiral. Now, according to the Fire Lord's own word, Zhao had a greater legal claim on capturing the Avatar than Zuko did. It was unfair, but it wasn't the worst part about it. Much more was the order implied on Ahuzai's wishes. All this time, Zuko had thought his father was being harsh on him to teach him a lesson, but that he still wished that Zuko would succeed in his quest, redeem his honor, and return home. It seemed Zuko had been wrong. He didn't feel angry or sad or betrayed. He only felt numb. And maybe it was because of the numbness. But the part in the letter mentioning Zuko wasn't the part that bothered him the most. Zuko had never been particularly interested in the schemes of the court. But having been raised in the Fire Palace, he wasn't unfamiliar with them, either. As he had both pre-existing knowledge of the people and the places mentioned in the letter, and a firm understanding of the incorrect language used in formal letters, Zuko could read many things between the lines, implied messages and meanings Zhao would have been meant to understand, and which he undoubtedly had understood. Like the fact the letter considered to be so many permissions to punish people and destroy things, instead of encouraging the Admiral to work toward peaceful solutions. Zuko knew his nation was at war, and war had casualties, but they weren't at war with everyone at once. After 100 years, most of the world wasn't putting up much of a fight. This Zuko had learned through experience. All water was enemy water to a banished prince of the Fire Nation, but only a handful of them tried to stop him in practice. In Zuko's opinion, In these regions, they were submitting to Fire Nation dominion. It was their duty to help rebuild peace and prosperity, not kill and destroy. The Fire Lord was the ruler of much of the world, and that came with responsibility toward not only the citizens of the Fire Nation, but all those who lived in Fire Nation conquered areas. The county of Baluk mentioned in the letter had belonged to Fire Nation for over a decade. There was still some resistance there, but the majority of the local populace wasn't causing trouble. In there, Fire Nation should have focused on rebuilding, not on witch hunts. If we more often showed people how great life would be under Fire Nation rule, maybe they wouldn't fight back so hard. Zuko knew he was probably being grossly optimistic, but the road toward peace had to start somewhere. Then there was the matter of the Battle of Lohun Bay. Zuko would have been hard-pressed to call it a victory, considering how many men the Fire Nation had lost in it. Congratulating for it gave the wrong incentives. One more thing caught Zuko's attention in the letter. It was the supposed resignation of Councilman Fong. Zuko had attended a War Council meeting only that one fateful time, but he still remembered all the members and had later memorized the protocols. No matter which way you looked at it, the resignation was completely unexpected and even unorthodox. A position in the War Council was for life. The members of the War Council were supposed to be able to express all kinds of opinions freely, and therefore the members could not be fired from the position if anything short of treason. Plucking off troublesome members would have made decision-making fast, but it wouldn't have guaranteed the decisions were better, and it might even endanger the representation of Fire Nation provinces in important decisions. Of course, the Fire Lord always had the last word in everything, but the Council couldn't tell him what to do. The Council's job was to let the Fire Lord know of different things going on in his nation, and what different groups and counties, namely those their nobility, wanted him to do. That's what it had been for in times of peace. Anyway, when the War Council was referred to as the High Council. Members of the High Council were usually nobility from counties that had been loyal to the Fire Lord's line even before the last civil war 300 years ago. Before that, the Fire Lord had only been one of many regional rulers. But after the Civil War, all the Fire clans had been united under one king. Thus, the Fire Nation was formed. In a time of peace, council members were traditionally chosen from noble families whose countries were small or poor. The principal idea was that families that had wealth and influence already had a way to be heard, and thus had no need for added political power. This was a way to keep political power and wealth separate, and a practical way to ensure no family was so powerful that they compete with the Fire Lord's line. No one should have more power than the Fire Lord. In a time of war, however, the Council's main focus shifted from inner to outer affairs, and the criteria for new members changed along with it. After 100 years of war, all the members of the current Council had a military background, and most of them were seasoned generals, although the Fire Lord held unlimited power in the Fire Nation. If he constantly ignored the Council's recommendations, the nobility might grow restless, feeling their needs weren't being attended to. At a worst-case scenario, this could start acting out, procrastinating with their deliveries or even withholding information on the populace to complicate the drafts, which is why Zuko was both surprised and worried to hear Fong had resigned. The members were free to resign if, for example, their health no longer allowed them to continue in their position, but as far as Zuko knew, Fong wasn't old or sick. Being a member of the council was a great honor, and not something handed away casually. Fong was a determined and sometimes difficult man, but a man of honor nonetheless. Why would he resign? And more importantly, why would Ozai himself emphasize the resignation by telling it to Zhao personally, obviously implying Fong's opinion on whatever they were planning had been known and unwanted? In the given context, it also sounded like Zhao was suggesting that Fong might be trouble, and that Ozai had dealt with the matter. Looking back on Ozai's term as the Fire Lord, the fluctuation of council members had been rather great. Father had ruled only 6 years, and almost a third of the current council had been appointed during his reign. A quiet clanking sound echoed behind the door, drawing Zuko's attention back to the here and now. Swiftly put out the torch and listened to someone walk past him in the corridor. Thankfully that someone walked by, not trying to get into the room. As the footsteps faded, Zuko looked at the letter still in his hand. An irrational urge to crumple the document, maybe even burn it to ash, nearly took the prince over. Before he had time to change his mind, Zuko folded the hidden papers back into the vase and placed the vase back on the shelf, exactly where he found it. Wanting to destroy the letter was foolish. It wouldn't eradicate the message of the letter, nor to erase the memory of it from Zuko's mind. It only served to let Zhao know someone had poked around. Zuko was already to the door when he realized he wasn't sure where he was going. He had a good guess on where the Avatar was, but should he still go free the boy? Having learned what Zuko had, he could no longer say he was doing what he was doing because Zhao was a fool who didn't care about the Fire Nation. It was the Fire Lord's explicit wishes that the Avatar was caught as soon as possible, preferably by Zhao. And freeing the Avatar, Zuko wasn't just going against the Admiral, he was going against his father. Should Zuko do it anyway? Should he help the Avatar escape? The blue spirit opened the door and ghosted through the corridors, faster and less careful than he had been, but still silent as a grave. Zuko would never become the Fire Lord. He would never see his nation again. For all these things he would mourn. Later. But not now. Now he had an Avatar to save.